Good morning. So nice to be here with all of you today. I'm very honored to be moderating our panel on U.S.-Japan relations today. As many of you surely know, Senator McCain had a deep relationship with not only Japan, but also many countries in Asia, spent a lot of time focusing on our relationships there. But many of you may not know that he had a particular penchant for quoting one Asian leader, Jack knows what I'm going to say, Chairman Mao Zedong. And Senator McCain would often say, as Mao says, it's always darkest before it goes completely black. What's funny about that is, of course, Mao never said that. And Senator McCain knew that Mao never said that. So John McCain would never quote Mao Zedong, but he loved to misquote Mao Zedong. But the McCain family relationship with Asia and Japan specifically goes way back further than that. Let me start by taking you back to Tokyo Bay, September 2nd, 1945. Admiral John Sidney Slew McCain, the senator's grandfather, stood on the deck of the USS Missouri as Japan formally surrendered. He had spent 4 years leading a carrier task force across the Pacific in some of the most dangerous and successful battles of the war. He was 60 years old, and the war had ground him down to roughly about 100 pounds. Before the surrender ceremony, he had requested from the Fleet Admiral William Halsey that he be able to go home and recover, but Halsey insisted that he attended the ceremony. Slew McCain came back from the Pacific. His wife met him at the airfield. He sat down in his chair at his welcome party, and he passed away that very day. That's how much of himself he had left in the Pacific. He would not know that only a generation later, the country that he had spent his whole life, his career fighting, would become the cornerstone of the U.S. alliance structure in Asia. And he would not know that his family would spend the next 8 decades, and 1, 2, 3, 4 generations maybe, defending that alliance. And Senator John McCain, who grew up hearing that story, wrote very reverently about his grandfather. And I like to think because of that history, he was all that more dedicated to the U.S.-Japan relationship. And now, as his son sits on this stage, having organized the first Sedona Forum in Tokyo a few months ago, we know that that belief didn't die with Slew McCain or with Senator McCain. It lives on here today in this room. So that's in the spirit I'd like to have this conversation about where we are in the U.S.-Japan relationship. And I couldn't be happier with the panelists that we have here. Let me introduce them to you briefly. Senator Rui Matsukawa spent 23 years in Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working on disarmament, managing the Japan-Korea-China trilateral dialogue. She helped launch Japan's first government-organized international women's conference. She was parliamentary vice minister of defense, and she was the first of 3 Japanese politicians officially sanctioned by Vladimir Putin.
Sure.
Welcome. Congressman Akihisa Shiozaki holds degrees from the University of Tokyo, Stanford, Wharton. Before entering politics, he had a distinguished career as a corporate litigator, participating in some of the most famous cases in Japanese corporate crisis. And if that wasn't enough, he also authored the LDP's AI white paper, which then became the foundation for Japan's national AI strategy, which he is now in the process of leading the implementation of. So he's the person who wrote the rules of how Japan will fight the next war. Congressman, thank you so much. And we all know Jack McCain, but what you may not know about him is that in addition to flying search and rescue missions for the Navy in Afghanistan and leading government affairs for American Airlines, he now leads Blue Sky, which connects governments and strategic American industries with Japan, India, and the Indo-Pacific at the center of it. Jack, let me start with you. How do you think that your great-grandfather and your father would view this moment in U.S. foreign policy in Asia and in U.S.-Japan relations? And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. First, I'm grateful to be able to inflict myself upon all of you again and to be the least esteemed person on this stage. So thank you both for traveling all the way from Japan to be here. And the last time I saw Josh was actually in Gotanda Hills at a Shijimi ramen restaurant about the size of these two chairs. So
great ramen. Amazing.
I've got to plug your watches and ramen Instagram. But moving on, how would my grandfather and great-grandfather look at this moment? I think that they would look at it as probably the most strategic and important period of time for the country of Japan since World War II. And I will use a couple of statistics to help illuminate that. The first one, excluding General Anderson, how many of you know that Japan has a military base on the continent of Africa? Okay, we've got...
I didn't know that.
I should have excluded you also. Japan, in fact, has a military base in Djibouti with about 150 people on it for counter-piracy operations. Now, when we think of the United States passport, we Americans have a tendency to believe that it's the most powerful on the planet. The U.S. can travel visa-free to about 184 countries, which is diminishing at this period of time, actually. Japan can travel to 195 countries, including Iran, which is probably the most remarkable statistic. But Japan sits at a moment right now where it has just authorized the exportation of defensive weapons systems for the first time since the end of World War II. It has authorized the creation of what we would call the CIA, and it is currently debating the merits of Article 9 going forward. Article 9 being the defense-only aspect of its constitution. So I would say that they would look at this as a period of great change, a period of important change, and a period where Japan is stepping up to its rightful place as a world leader and the leader in the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you so much. Senator, let me go to you next. You know, it's true that Japan has doubled its defense budget ahead of schedule, set to invest more. It's participating in Golden Dome. It's participating in procurement, defense exports, as Jack said. The question for me is not whether Japan is stepping up. The question is whether that's enough to sustain the relationship at a time that the United States' commitment in the region is under question. And as you look at the formation of Japan's new national security strategy, the new national defense strategy, which kicked off last week in Tokyo, what should we understand about how Japan is changing, what this new foreign policy in Tokyo will look like, and how much of that is related to Japan becoming less reliant on the United States in a future that's less predictable and perhaps more chaotic?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. But before answering to the specific question raised, I would like to just say, hearing the Madam Akie Abe's speech, I would like to share with you that I've been a diplomat, career diplomat for more than 20 years, and I loved my job. I never imagined to be a politician. If it were not Prime Minister Abe, I wouldn't have even thought about becoming a politician. So I really think that what Prime Minister Abe left for Indo-Pacific, a strategy, as a strategy to us, and then also now that the following leaders are based on that assets, trying to establish more resilient region and more self-reliant Japan, departing from the post-war regime. That's what I think the Japan basically have been working on, and is now that more drastically and more, catching the pace to hasten the completion. And responding to your question, that is what actually we're doing. Because, yes, I have to be honest, I think it's a fair judgment that U.S. now, the present U.S. is less powerful vis-a-vis China than before, let's say, and also maybe less predictable, if I may say it this way. Therefore, Japan is, and then the third thing, be assured, our alliance, Japan-US alliance, is strongest in the history, I think. And everybody in Japan believes in so. That being said, what Japan should do, we have to protect our nation on ourselves, by ourselves. So first thing we are doing is to strengthen our own defense capability in many fields. And it's not just defense, but technology or like economy or information, intelligence, all the things we have to tackle on. In my opinion, what is left as the post-war regime that we haven't been able to complete is one is intelligence, the other is sea lane protection, and then a new way of fighting. But now that the direction is to strengthen our own capability, in many fields, all fields, food security, energy security, resources security, defense capability, all of it, economic security. The other thing we have been actually, it's not something new we are doing. We have been tackling on for these, let's say, 10 years, but especially these couple of years is to increase the partnership. Increase the partnership with the countries that we can share the strategic interests, like in UK or Australia or recent South Korea, and also the countries in first island chain, the Philippines, possibly Indonesia and India, although these latter two countries are more independent. So that we are doing. So if I answer it to you correctly, and then abolishing the restrictions of arms sales completely now is something that one step forward for making our country more independent and strong. And that defense equipment transfer can facilitate deepening a relationship with these countries, because it will make an irreversible deepening of the defense relationship. If the Philippines has the Japanese vessels or the Japanese radar, then our relationship will stay forever, right? Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, you were a leader in the parliament in pushing for those changes to allow Japan to export more defense articles.
Yeah, I even established the parliamentary league 6 years ago.
6 years ago, wow.
At that time, it was so minor. The defense equipment export was such a minor issue. Now it's central, so I'm really happy for that.
I heard that a lot in Tokyo, that on the political level, there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty, but on the military level, actually U.S. Japan relations are as good as they've ever been. You hear that a lot in Tokyo. And one aspect of that, of course, is intelligence. And Congressman, I didn't even have time in your bio to mention this, but in addition to all the other jobs that you have, you're leading the intelligence strategy, the intelligence reform strategy. Tell us about that. A lot of people in this room know the history of, let's say, incomplete U.S.-Japan intelligence sharing due to reforms that we've wanted to see in the Japanese system. What's going on? How are they happening? What's the benefit? What are the risks?
Thank you. First, I want to echo Matsukawa-san's comment that I was also moved by Akihisa-san's speech by Prime Minister Abe leading the path for the Alliance of Hope. I think without his tremendous leadership, we would not be sitting here. And I also recall that Senator McCain once said that together with allied partners of many decades, like Japan, we grasp the unfolding challenges of the world and make the United States and Japan and Asia more prosperous and free. I think Senator McCain understood that the U.S.-Japan alliance was not a transactional contract, but a generational commitment. And we honor him today by acting upon those words. So I want to thank the McCain family and the Institute and everyone here for holding the Tokyo Forum and inviting us here. And especially to Jack, who is sacrificing for us his 40th birthday today.
Oh.
Congratulations.
Happy birthday, Jack.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate that.
In terms of the importance of the alliance, there has been a number of changes that have been undergoing recently. One, as Rui-san mentioned, the role of Japan is changing. Second, I think, importantly, we need to note that economic security is now national security. These are not two separate fields. AI, semiconductors, undersea cables, these and satellites. These are very intertwined challenges that our oppositions have no reluctance in coercing when these confrontations realize. So in that sense, I think we need to be super mindful of how dependence does affect our defense strategy, and that we cannot alone be economically autonomous, but we need partners to fulfill our economic security needs in the coming future. And third, I do want to touch upon intelligence, because this is what I am currently working on, and I'll be traveling to Washington, D.C. right after this forum. Japan is undertaking a massive reform in strengthening its intelligence capabilities, which is becoming more and more increasingly important in this security circumstance. We are currently debating a establishment of a national intelligence committee that will be at the ministerial level, a new form of governance structure that will heal the stovepiping of the different intelligence agencies in Japan. We also are working on strengthening counterintelligence and security measures in order to, and this is important, ensure interoperability with our alliance partners. So we understand that the Five Eyes countries share information at a very high level based on an interoperable platform. And I think it is important, both for our allies and for Japan, to be able to share information confidentially, because we have complementary capabilities.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking of economic security, Jack, let me turn to you. You're spending a lot of time in Tokyo these days. You're meeting with businesses there. You're doing business there. And from what we can see, the economic approach has been first tariffs, then a deal to lower the tariffs, but to extract from Japan a promise to invest $550 billion, details pending, into a consortium where 90% of the profits would go to the United States and for a period of time. And the projects would be chosen jointly, but really by the United States. How's that going over in Tokyo?
Tough question. So I'll be very, very clear.
And how do people feel about the U.S.-Japan relationship, given that our approach has been to take this aggressive trade position?
Sure. I think that it is a bit schizophrenic to argue for a free and open Indo-Pacific while at the same time utilizing tariffs as a cudgel. I don't think that that's too partisan of a statement, but maybe I'm edging on it. I think that there's a significant amount of confusion when it comes to tariffs specifically, as to, from a Japanese lawmaker perspective, it's brought to me, okay, we've been a loyal ally since the end of World War II, and now you've decided to impose tariffs on us in a way that damages our economy at an especially difficult time. I think that I would have the exact same perspective. Prime Minister Takaichi is attempting to reform the economy, to move it forward, to control the inflation, and I would also be hurt by that. I think that the business relationship right now is very, very strong between the United States and Japan. I think the message that Japan is open for business has been received very, very well. When it comes specifically to the $550 billion investment, I think that there are differing and competing ideas as to what that looks like. I think, rightfully so, Japan wants to find opportunity that both strengthens the United States economy but also assists the Japanese economy. I use shipbuilding as an example. One of the projects I'm actually involved in that U.S. and Japan cooperating to build ships is good for the Japanese economy, good for the United States, and it solves a critical vulnerability of ours, incapability of building anything except warships. But if any of the lawmakers in the room here are listening, I would say Japan has been a loyal ally since the end of World War II, and to impose tariffs on a nation that we are now depending upon for a free and open Indo-Pacific is a bit of a fool's errand. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you so much. Senator, let me go to you next. Let's turn to China and Taiwan.
Okay.
Easy question. Prime Minister Takaichi said in one of her first remarks after taking office that a Chinese move on Taiwan could trigger a Japanese military response. The Chinese government retaliated instituted export controls to punish Japanese industry. Prime Minister Takaichi actually may have gotten more support in the next election because of these rising tensions. But at the same time, as I've heard you say before, Japan and China have to find a way to live together. So do you think this represents a departure in the Japanese approach to China and Taiwan? Do you think that was intentional? And now that we are where we are, how is your government approaching the Japan-China relationship, especially ahead of President Trump's visit there next week?
Okay, important question. And by the way, her remark was not intentional. If you look at the debates thoroughly, then she was nailed to answer the question after question, and then that was, she said it, accordingly. But the thing is, I want to make clear, one, Japan's position with regards to Taiwan hasn't changed a bit from the beginning. We have been very solid about our position that there are two sides if there is any difference of opinion, needs to be settled peacefully. That's one thing. The second pillar is, though Japan opposes any unilateral change of the status quo by force, we oppose. And third, according to the San Francisco Treaty, because we came back to the international community by signing the San Francisco Treaty, and there we formally abandoned our position vis-a-vis Taiwan, position of Taiwan. Therefore, we don't have any formal position to say over the position of Taiwan. That three pillars stays the same. And her remarks has been in that interpretation within. So there shouldn't be any hard reaction by China. My suspect is, well, of course, China has its maybe own view, but in a way, they are using this remark as showing to the world that if any country stepping one step over the Taiwan issue, this is what happens. It's like a bullying. So I do hope that China sees the reality, and then Japanese government make it very public that we are open-minded. So anytime we want to have a honest talk with China, because China is an important neighbor, and would like to build a constructive relations. So that's our position. And then secondly, now that President Trump is going to visit China and to have a summit meeting, and that's good. I think two nations needs to also manage the relations fine. And my guess is basically it's more or less about the economic, for the US perspective, economic issues is most important, like whereas. But that being said, I think, as I mentioned, what Japan sees China is we have to deter any military aggressive action against any of our islands or to Taiwan. We want to deter such situations. That's why we need Japan-US alliance stronger. And so that shouldn't be jeopardized. And yet also, Japan itself wants to improve the relationship with China. What we need is a peaceful coexistence, not conflicts. And we have long history. Although my sense is Xi Jinping's China is different from the previous. Previously, like under the Deng Xiaoping, China has been on the collective leadership. But I think Xi Jinping's, President Xi's leadership is departure from that and much closer to one person's authoritarianism. And then he made clear that the power is the most important portion rather than economy. So I think we need to adjust the posture, but at the same time, China is China. Geography doesn't change. We want to have the sound relationship. So I want to see the opportunity to seek the stabilization of the relationship with China through this year. Maybe APEC could be one opportunity, I'm hoping.
In Miami in November.
Yeah.
If Xi Jinping comes to Florida. Interesting. Thank you. Congressman Shiozaki, let me ask you the same question. As Xi Jinping welcomes Donald Trump to Beijing, what are you thinking in Tokyo? What's the risk of that? What would be a good summit? What would be a bad summit from Tokyo's perspective? And what's your view on the current tension in Tokyo-Beijing relations and the United States' role in that?
Well, thank you. I agree completely with what Rui said, and I'll just add 2 points. So in terms of Takaichi-san's statement, we need to remind ourselves that the original statement, it needs to be understood accurately. What she said was that in the situation of an aggression by China on Taiwan, if an allied nation's battleship is attacked by China and Japan's security is undermined, then that would constitute a trigger for collective self-defense.
Interesting.
Which is the obvious. I mean, you would be also angry if we said, maybe, maybe not. So we need to remind ourselves that the original statement was completely in line with what scholars and the government had anticipated in the past. So Japan's position has not changed. The statement serves not to raise tensions in the area, but to avoid confrontation. So I think that is the intent. Now, secondly, I also, and this goes to your question, I think we need to be very careful of how ambiguity in our position can sometimes serve to stabilize the situation, but in other situations could lead to be an invitation for provocation. In the current situation, the rising tensions, I believe clarity is key for deterrence. And it is so much more costly to resolve a situation once an incident happens. We've all learned that from many parts of the world. So this is a front that Japan and the United States need to continue to work together on very closely, not to send the wrong signal to our international counterparts in the world.
Excellent. Congressman, let me stay with you to ask you about your AI strategy. Excuse me. I think a lot of people in this room are pretty familiar with the U.S. AI strategy. Lots of innovation, lots of investment, not a lot of regulation. We're familiar with the European AI strategy, lots of regulation. We're familiar with the Chinese AI strategy, lots of manufacturing, open source, et cetera. What's Tokyo's take on that? How do you fit into those competing strategies? Do you have a different one than all of those, or does it match one of those more closely? And by formalizing it, what are you trying to tell the world?
Thank you, Josh. So we just came out with our AI white paper 2.0 last week. And the key message is we are going to transform Japan into an AI-driven nation, which means we'll be focusing on diffusion. We'll be the first movers on diffusing AI into all spectrums of society. How do we do that? We have pointed 3 paradigm shifts that will be necessary. One is shifting from sovereign AI to AI sovereignty. In the past, there was a lot of excitement about building our own Japanese AI, the full stack. That'll be nice to do, but maybe the competition is so harsh that Japan can adopt a different strategy, AI sovereignty, where we ensure that we have autonomy, that we are not shut down. We have the right and ability to continue to use AI in a respectable manner in society. So that's perspective number 1. Second is we are shifting from discussing what AI can do to what can humans only do. So a lot of what we do in society will be replaceable by AIs, unfortunately or fortunately, in the coming years. But it is very important to focus again on the impact that it has on how we work, how we value our lives in society. So we will be putting tremendous focus on labor impact, on education, on using AI for science in Japan. And third, we're moving from a regulation, single dimension discussion to a multidimensional architecture of building trust. We used to debate whether we're going to go for the EU strict regulation model or the laissez-faire US model. And we did pass a law last year that is lightly regulated. But in the coming years, regulation alone will not be enough to build trust on AI use. We believe that regulation is one pillar, but we need technical control and user literacy. These three elements will combine to build a safe forum for AIs to be diffused in society. So those are some of the initiatives that Japan will be working on.
Fascinating. Well, I know two things that AI can't replace, which is leadership and service, and that's represented by the three of you today. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your time today. And could we please give our panelists one last round of applause?